A fierce battle unfolds as 5 warriors surround a lone figure clad in red detailed armor, gripping a massive sword. Despite his wounds, he stands firm. The young man leading the assault declares this will be the final blow. His companions prepare to strike in unison. The blue-caped warrior's enormous blade gleams in the sunlight. He slams it into the ground with tremendous force, triggering an explosion that tears the earth apart. The armored target remains motionless as a barrage of attacks hurtles toward him. In one fluid motion, he launches himself skyward, deflecting every strike with his oversized sword. Not a single blow lands. A long-haired girl activates her magic from a distance, channeling energy to strengthen the blue-caped warrior. Her blessing surges through him, amplifying his determination. He strikes again, unleashing another devastating explosion that sends the gray-armored young man crashing into a wall. A torrent of radiant energy rushes toward him, cornering him completely. To everyone's shock, the trapped warrior merely watches with an emotionless expression. He realizes he cannot block this attack. The impact echoes violently as debris scatters everywhere. Launched through the air with his cape ablaze, he wonders if this is the end. Gazing at the blue sky, he reflects that perhaps this is a fitting conclusion for a demon lord. His body collapses to the ground. Consciousness slowly returns. Confused, he wonders why he hears so much commotion. A voice commands someone to finish the job quickly. This is the demon lord, and they cannot risk him regaining his powers. Still disoriented, he sits up, bewildered that he's still breathing. Before him stands the blue-caped warrior, staring coldly. The protagonist smiles internally, thinking the man is annoyingly handsome. The blonde warrior, irritated, orders someone named ʔᴏ to pay attention. He begins listing the young man's crimes, annihilating hundreds of holy knights from the Order of ʀᴇᴜᴜ, including innocent people. But his greatest sin remains unspoken. ʔᴏ stops listening, fixated on how naturally the man speaks. When his focus returns, he hears the warrior pronounce his sentence, death. Anger flares within ʔᴏ. Though everything said is true, surrendering would disgrace his title as Demon Lord. He decides to use his secret weapon, the fate-distorting key, to land one final strike on his insufferable opponent. This blade alters the target's fate, rewriting their future. The warrior raises his sword to deliver justice, hoping ʔᴏ finds redemption in his next life. ʔᴏ responds that he will, if given the chance, but not today. Even after being struck down, he rises, declaring he has unfinished business. With one hand concealed, he activates the blade, emitting a brilliant purple glow. Locking eyes with his opponent, ʔᴏ announces this is his last strike. A hole appears in the blonde warrior's armor. Tree roots begin sprouting across his skin. Furious, he demands to know what ʔᴏ has done. With a wicked grin, ʔᴏ replies that judging by his rage, the trick worked perfectly. Undeterred, the blue-caped warrior strikes once more, ending the demon lord's life. In his final thoughts, ʔᴏ accepts his death without regret. Sunlight streams through a window, signaling a new day. In bed, ʔᴏ wakes irritated by birdsong disrupting his sleep. Suddenly, he realizes where he is. Confused, he stares at his legs beneath the sheets, then at his hands. He touches his neck where the fatal wound should be. Leaping from bed, he rushes to a mirror. He's young again. Memory fragments return he lost to Glenn and his companions. He used the fate-distorting key on the boy before dying, but everything after that remains blank. Examining his surroundings, ʔᴏ concludes he's traveled back in time to when he lived with his family. His priority now is recovering the fate-distorting key. The door bursts open mid-thought. He wonders who dares intrude upon the eldest son of a noble family. A blonde boy appears, addressing him as "my lord" and asking why he hasn't left his room yet. Though ʔᴏ doesn't recognize him, he appreciates being treated with respect. The boy explains that ʔᴏ usually rises at dawn, no longer having the luxury of sleeping in. ʔᴏ beckons the boy closer. The servant obeys immediately. Without warning, ʔᴇᴜ punches him hard across the face. Clutching his cheek, the boy asks why. ʔᴇᴜ approaches with a dark expression, making the blonde boy realize he's in serious trouble. Boots slam into his body, throwing him to the ground. Furious, ʔᴇᴜ stomps on the servant's head repeatedly, delivering kick after kick without mercy. The boy tearfully begs for forgiveness. A voice demands to know what's happening, but the beating continues until someone enters the room. The blonde boy scrambles into the arms of Sir Halton. The knight asks what's happening, which irritates ʔᴜ. He feels disrespected. Halton questions why ʔᴜ won't answer. With a mocking look, ʔᴜ calls Halton rude. The knight asks if ʔᴜ intends to attack him too. Smiling, ʔᴜ sees no reason not to. A servant who disrespects his master must be taught his place. Halton challenges whether ʔᴜ has the skill to back up that threat. Retreating slightly, ʔᴜ admits he cannot defeat Halton in his current condition. However, as master, he cannot allow such disobedience to go unpunished. Halton demands if ʔᴜ even knows who he's addressing. A tablecloth suddenly flies toward him, covering his head. As the warrior struggles, the blonde boy screams his name. ʔᴜ appears mid-air, wielding a flower pot. He smashes it over Halton's head, shattering it completely. Wiping his hands as his opponent falls, ʔᴜ states that strength isn't everything. Turning to the blonde boy, he tells him to return to his duties. The terrified servant receives a fist to his face. Screams for help echo from outside the room. ʔᴜ stops before two massive doors, remembering how frightened he once was to enter. Now, he feels nothing. Inside, 5 people stare at him, including the beaten boy and Halton, finally awake after being struck. Pure rage burns in the knight's eyes. He recalls a red-haired boy warning him earlier that their father had learned of his humiliating defeat and was extremely disappointed. The boy is Greg Steelwall, ʔᴜ's half-brother. Placing a hand on Halton's shoulder, Greg asks if he did something wrong. If not, he should hold his head high since they're dealing with his half-brother. The man on the throne announces that ʔᴜ is late. This is Count Bordo Steelwall, ʔᴜ's biological father. Snorting, ʔᴜ asks why he was summoned. His attitude makes Bordo narrow his eyes, demanding respect. ʔᴜ retorts that he doesn't need to be respectful when the man refuses to acknowledge him as his son. Bordo questions how ʔᴜ expects to inherit the title of count with such behavior. ʔᴜ challenges whether his father truly plans to recognize him as his legitimate son. This deeply irritates Lord Steelwall, but his wife places a calming hand on his shoulder. The woman, Floral Steelwall, ʔᴜ's stepmother, claims she warned him about the boy's behavior. She describes ʔᴜ as perpetually disrespectful and rude. ʔᴜ clenches his fist, remembering clearly how cruel this woman and her son have always been, constantly scheming to eliminate him. Changing tactics, ʔᴜ bows and claims it was all a misunderstanding. He addresses Floral as mother with a mocking smile. She glares at him with bloodshot eyes. ʔᴜ asks if he was summoned because of Halton and Hans. Turning his back, he apologizes to his father, claiming he made a mistake while handling a sword. The boy and Knight watch, uncertain what comes next. Both Bordo and Greg widen their eyes, Greg beginning to sweat. ʔᴜ points his sword at Hans, declaring he'll clean up his mess immediately. Hans is a servant of the Steelwall family. The Count rises, demanding how ʔᴜ dares draw a weapon before him. Greg smiles. ʔᴜ claims anyone who insults the Steelwall family heir must die. He assumed that was the meeting's purpose. Floral intervenes, ordering him to stop since Hans never insulted him. Lowering his sword, ʔᴜ asks if they're calling him a liar. Panicking, Hans realizes that saying the wrong thing means death. Meanwhile, ʔᴜ wonders why the Countess protects Hans so fiercely. Halton steps forward, declaring Hans speaks the truth. ʔᴜ is lying. ʔᴜ smiles, admitting he didn't expect that. Floral asks if Halton is certain. He confirms both he and Hans were attacked by ʔᴜ without provocation. ʔᴇᴛ calls it amusing ʟᴠᴇᴜ admits being attacked by someone like him, yet won't admit he was wrong. ʟᴠᴇᴜ insists he only spoke truth. ʔᴇᴛ challenges ʟᴠᴇᴜ to a duel to settle this. Annoyed, ʟᴠᴇᴜ questions if he's serious. Pointing his sword at the knight, ʔᴇᴜ asks his father if that isn't proper. He stakes his inheritance if he loses the duel. He loses his claim as heir. Bordeaux permits the duel. ʟᴠᴜᴜ accepts his lord's command while ʔᴑ thanks his father with a smile. Leaving, ʔᴑ asks to be informed of the time and place. Bordeaux had only planned to scold and dismiss him, but realizes this might be the perfect opportunity to give the position to Greg. Before exiting, ʔᴑ mentions he almost changed his mind. Even if he wins, he won't get what he wants. Bordeaux asks what he means. ʔᴑ simply says his father would never understand. He'll see him at the duel. Outside, testing his abilities, ʔᴑ reflects on inhabiting his 19-year-old body once weak and naive, desperate for his father's approval, unable to even handle a sword since Bordeaux forbade fencing lessons. Back then, he had no idea of the massive, destructive power dormant within him. Each person has a mana limit. ʔᴑ's limit is extraordinarily high compared to average people. Using his power, pain shoots through his chest. An explosion throws him backward. He realizes he cannot immediately return to his demon lord mana levels. Achieving that title required countless trials. Things kept happening to him, almost as if everything had been planned by someone. Rising, ʔᴑ orders Greg to stop spying and leave. His half-brother wonders how he was discovered. Emerging from behind a tree, Greg asks if ʔᴑ has finally awakened his mana and truly believes he can win the duel and inherit the title with those skills. Smiling, Greg questions why his younger brother suddenly acts so differently instead of keeping his head down for future rewards. ʔᴑ approaches, staring intensely. With veins bulging on his face, he says he knows Greg fears he'll inherit the title. Greg denies this, stating if he cannot handle someone like ʔᴑ, he should abandon his claim. Placing his hand on Greg's shoulder, ʔᴑ asks if he's certain because then he'll fulfill his older brother's wish and resolve the succession dispute more forcefully, as he was raised to do. Pushing ʔᴑ's hand away, Greg asks if he's truly challenging him to a duel. ʔᴑ asks his response. Greg replies he has no reason to refuse. Walking away, ʔᴑ declares everything is settled, he'll choose the time and place. The day of ʔᴑ versus ʟᴠᴜ arrives. The knight shouts that he took his earlier lesson seriously, now it's his turn to teach. Today, he'll prove that skill determines victory. Holding his sword, ʔᴑ wonders what ʟᴠᴜ is talking about. A gray-haired knight approaches, asking if ʟᴠᴜ is ready. ʟᴠᴜ confirms while ʔᴑ regards him mockingly. The knight announces the duel has begun. Both warriors charge forward simultaneously, meeting in a clash of blades. Blocking ʟᴠᴜ's strike, ʔᴑ remarks that despite everything, he's still a knight. This triggers something in ʟᴠᴜ's mind. He begins smiling. Raising his sword for a killing blow, he asks how it feels now that ʔᴑ realizes he can never win fairly. Consecutive strikes force ʔᴑ backward. ʟᴠᴜ's sword glows reddish as he delivers another attack. ʔᴑ manages to defend but begins sweating, unlike the still smiling ʟᴠᴜ. In the viewing area, Steelwall family members watch. A man tells Bordeaux his son performs better than expected, having blocked several attacks. Floral notes the knight still holds the advantage. The elder agrees ultimately. ʔᴑ never properly learned swordsmanship while Greg glares furiously. Bordeaux watches silently. The crowd chants ʟᴠᴜ's name, demanding he finish the fight. Smiling, ʟᴠᴜ says he has a duty to give spectators what they want. With different movement, he breaks free from ʔᴑ's block. About to strike again, he orders ʔᴑ to surrender if he wishes to keep his body intact. Gripping his blue glowing sword, ʔᴑ refuses. Surrendering is out of the question. He's just getting started. Internally, ʔᴑ reflects that he doesn't know if this trick will work, but he must try. Seeing ʔᴑ advance, ʟᴠᴜ is stunned, clearly recognizing what's coming. ʔᴇᴛ unleashes extension of the senses, finally wiping the smile from Halton's face. The knight desperately dodges the light waves, escaping successfully, unlike the ground, now completely shattered. Still gripping his trembling sword, ʔᴇᴛ's mana remains unstable and uncontrolled. They stare at each other from distance. Shocked spectators question if they really saw that. The old family servant wonders if that was truly the extension of the senses technique, synchronizing body and sword with mana, moving the blade as an extension of limbs. Sweating, Halton wonders when ʔᴇᴛ learned such a technique. He concludes the mana usage remains sloppy with unsynchronized movements. Since his opponent is merely ʔᴇᴛ Steelwall, it's time to stop playing. Halton charges, his flaming sword aimed directly at ʔᴇᴛ, determined to end this. To his shock, ʔᴇᴛ dodges easily. Halton reveals one more surprise. Shouting for ʔᴇᴛ to dodge this, he launches another strike. This time, ʔᴇᴛ has nowhere to run. A massive explosion erupts from the strike called Piercing Space. ʔᴇᴛ lies motionless in a crater formed by the impact. Spectators roar, praising Halton's expected victory. The knight smiles, declaring the outcome decided, no reason for ʔᴇᴛ to risk his life further. Something hits the ground ʔᴛ's sword. Rising, he announces that with this body, he cannot defeat Halton with techniques alone, but with real combat. Without hesitation, he charges at full speed, dragging his sword along the ground, kicking up dust into Halton's face. Taking advantage of his blinded opponent, ʔᴛ attacks with full force, brutally slamming the knight to the ground. Halton survives and sits up, wiping his eyes. Annoyed, he calls the strike a cheap trick, but suddenly realizes ʔᴛ's sword tip is at his throat. ʔᴛ asks if he'll still complain after losing in real combat. Halton, with no escape, surrenders. ʔᴛ states the only reasons Halton didn't win were his arrogance and fear of killing the Steelwall family's eldest son. If he learns this lesson, he can grow stronger. The gray-haired knight prepares to declare the winner, leaving spectators anxious, including Greg. The announcement comes: ʔᴛ Steelwall is victorious. The outraged crowd shouts that it's unfair ʔᴛ cheated, violating the knight's code. Mocking them, ʔᴛ declares that winning is what matters. Above, Bordeaux asks when his son learned mana techniques if no one taught him. The servant suggests ʔᴛ always had natural talent. Furious, Greg thinks it impossible his half-brother is still standing after receiving Halton's strike. Suddenly, someone shouts Greg's name. On the battlefield, ʔᴛ challenges him to their scheduled duel, reminding him he'd choose the time and place. Crossing his arms, Bordeaux asks what he's talking about. ʔᴛ questions why his father pretends ignorance when he already approved it. Confused spectators confirm rumors that the two brothers would fight for the Count title. They question how ʔᴛ wants to duel again while injured. Shouting, ʔᴛ asks what Greg is waiting for, hasn't he come down yet? Such hesitation makes him look like a coward. Bordeaux orders Greg to descend. Greg is surprised. His father asks if he's truly afraid of fighting his injured half-brother. Not wanting to dishonor his father, Greg descends. Approaching ʔᴛ, he wonders why his brother smiles like that. Gripping his sword, he realizes he no longer recognizes him. ʔᴛ calls his name, asking if he's standing there like an idiot waiting for an attack. If so, as the older brother, he'll take the first step. Greg sees his brother approaching at high speed and begins sweating, but successfully blocks the first strike. He realizes something is wrong. ʔᴛ isn't using strength in his attack. He shouldn't have expected anything different. He decides to strike back, declaring he will be the Steelwall heir. Caught by surprise, ʔᴛ grits his teeth, concluding his injuries prevent him from using mana again. If he wants to finish this, there's only one way. ʔᴛ laughs aloud. Blood his own begins dripping to the ground. He's grabbed Greg's sword blade barehanded, asking if his brother knows the dance of death. With his power activated using only one hand, he shatters Greg's sword, leaving him speechless. With his darkest glare, ʔᴏ warns that if Greg doesn't surrender now, this will be his last day alive. Without hesitation, he strikes Greg with the sword's hilt directly in his face. Greg falls like a sack of potatoes, groaning in pain, missing a tooth. ʔᴏ stabs his sword into the ground beside Greg's head, standing over him terrifyingly. Crying, Greg surrenders. The knight announces ʔᴏ as the winner again. Spectators stand speechless and disbelieving. Looking at his father, ʔᴏ declares he's won. Bordeaux must now fulfill his promise and acknowledge him as the legitimate heir. Furious, Bordeaux shouts, asking how a mere duel can decide anything. Someone points out that ʔᴏ won both duels. Will the Count break his promise so dishonorably? Showing no surprise, ʔᴏ removes the family ring and throws it toward his father, stating he never wanted the title anyway. The ring spins, stopping at Bordeaux's feet. The Count can only think how reckless his son is. Floral begs her husband to stay calm, but the enraged man demands to know the meaning of this. ʔᴏ declares he's leaving the family from this moment. Someone carries Greg from the arena. ʔᴏ calls to him, advising never to forget that to win a fight, one must never fear death, especially at the borders of Steelwall County, constantly under attack. If Greg wants to protect his home, he must become stronger. Greg doesn't look back, continuing onward. ʔᴏ follows his brother's servant, grabbing a healing potion from his belt without asking. After drinking it, his wounds begin healing. He prays House Steelwall remembers what it learned today. Outside the mansion gates, ʔᴏ prepares to leave, but first needs to play a prank on Hans, whose eyes widen at something flying toward him. Flashing back several hours, Hans carried a laundry basket through the hallways, humming, when ʔᴏ appeared before him. In the darkness, Hans asked who was there. Seeing ʔᴏ, he panicked. ʔᴏ announced Hans would become his servant refuse, and he'd be annihilated right there. With no choice, Hans agreed. In the present, Hans is struck by ʔᴏ's flying suitcase. ʔᴏ orders him to carry his belongings. As they walk, ʔᴏ reflects that he can't believe he's forgiving a servant who insulted him all because he's too kind. Looking at Hans, he thinks the boy will be useful, but first needs stamina training. Aloud, ʔᴏ orders Hans to call him Lord ʔᴏ from now on. Hans asks about the plan. The Demon Lord says nothing is decided yet. First stop is Porty territory. After that, wherever life takes them. Now he'll try being a good person. Later, farther from home, Hans warns this isn't the usual path. ʔᴏ knows, but the original path is too winding, unlike walking straight. Hans says monsters roam these parts. ʔᴏ states that's exactly why they came this way, making Hans sweat nervously. A noise catches Hans's attention. He tries convincing himself it was nothing. Deeper in the forest, Hans remains terrified, desperately wanting to leave. ʔᴏ calls him, snapping him from his thoughts. Handing Hans a sword, he announces it's time to test his skills. Not understanding, Hans asks what he means. ʔᴏ simply tells him to look behind. Obeying, Hans turns and immediately panics. In the bushes, a red-eyed creature lurks, a goblin. Seeing the boys, it smiles, making Hans's legs fail. Terrified, Hans says he doesn't know how to use a sword. Could he fight with a bigger weapon instead? ʔᴏ tells him to stop whining or get kicked, which might actually help. Tired of the chatter, the goblin attacks. Hans screams, running frantically despite the creature's small size. ʔᴏ thinks this will require more work than expected. The goblin turns toward him, but before attacking, ʔᴏ strikes, throwing it back forcefully. Both the monster and Hans lie on the ground. Standing, Hans shouts, asking why ʔᴏ is doing this. The answer, because Hans is weak. He cannot be a servant if he's just a burden. Handing him a healing potion, ʔᴏ explains Hans needs training to protect himself. He warns the goblin is only knocked out and will wake soon. Time passes. Several empty potion bottles litter the ground. This time, Hans stands holding his sword like a warrior, ready to face the small monster. More confident, Hans charges forward at high speed. The goblin smiles at his foolish approach. It blocks the attack and strikes Hans with its club. Annoyed, Hans stares into the creature's red eyes, which smile along with its teeth. Showing improvement, Hans dodges his opponent's strike with agility and precision. ʔᴏ widens his eyes, surprised. Though a novice, Hans seems talented. The goblin faces the wrong direction, confused where Hans went. Suddenly, it senses the incoming strike. Hans appears behind it with bloodlust in his eyes, plunging his sword directly through the monster's head. Watching his opponent fall, Hans sighs heavily, looking at his hands, wondering if he finally won. Realizing he did, he jumps and shouts, feeling victorious. Approaching, ʔᴏ hands him another potion, saying Hans exceeded expectations. With a wide smile, Hans credits ʔᴏ. Suddenly, something catches Hans's attention. He drops the drink. Telling ʔᴏ to look aside, they see a furious horde approaching, more goblins, growling non-stop. ʔᴏ watches coldly while Hans sweats nervously again. Taking small steps forward, ʔᴏ crouches, picks up rocks, and hurls them at the monsters, leaving Hans terrified and confused. The stones strike the goblins' heads. They grow even angrier. ʔᴏ remains expressionless. Looking at Hans, he asks why he's surprised the fight is just beginning. Curious, Hans asks what he means. ʔᴏ simply tells him to look behind. Seeing giant orcs, Hans turns completely pale while ʔᴏ tells him not to worry, they have plenty of potions. Night falls, stars appearing. All monsters lie defeated. The boys rest by a campfire. ʔᴏ observes Hans completely passed out, snoring loudly. He remembers their earlier conversation when he asked why Floral protected Hans so much and what their relationship was. Hans explained his grandmother was the Countess's nanny, so she's liked him since childhood. ʔᴏ recalled his mother tormenting a servant because he was the grandson of Floral's nanny. This left Hans embarrassed and curious. ʔᴏ asked Hans's opinion of his late mother. Hans replied she was a good person who cared for all servants, always treating the Count respectfully, kind and warm to everyone. Returning to the present, analyzing Hans's lie, ʔᴏ realizes no one liked him at home because of his mother. Considering how she treated everyone, even he feels slightly bad for his father, Floral, and Greg, though it's not his fault. The sound of an approaching carriage catches his attention. Standing, he wakes Hans with light kicks. Hans protests it's not morning yet. ʔᴏ warns something approaches. Grabbing his sword, Hans asks if it's goblins or orcs. Soon, they spot a carriage. ʔᴏ puts Hans in front to lead. Sweating nervously, Hans suggests it might be a merchant. ʔᴏ denies it, the wheels sound too soft. Hans proposes their travelers like them. ʔᴏ replies no one travels through forests at this hour. Hearing the noise closer, Hans remains still, wondering who it could be. Footsteps approach two knights on horseback. Intrigued, ʔᴏ wonders if they're holy knights. Someone exits the carriage, announcing they plan to camp there tonight. ʔᴏ's eyes widen at who's speaking. Removing her hood, the young woman states she's a follower of ʔᴇᴜᴜ. Her name is ʟɪᴠᴜᴜ, the Saint of Mercy. ʔᴏ immediately recalls she's the saint who helped the blonde knight kill him in his previous life. His biggest surprise, he didn't expect to meet her here. Another person approaches ʟɪᴠᴜᴜ, Ain's assistant and candidate for ʔᴇᴜᴜ sainthood. ʔᴏ quietly notes the man is the killing machine of Tasnia's forces. He shakes the man's hand, having promised to be a good person, which includes building different relationships with people from his past life. Friendly, ʔᴏ says there's plenty of space for everyone. ʔɪᴠᴜᴜ thanks him. Looking at Hans, ʔᴏ says he should greet them as well. In the blink of an eye, Hans kneels at Ain's feet, introducing himself as a true sycophant. Quickly, the accompanying knights begin setting up a large tent. One man asks someone to hold a pole. Ain steps forward to help, but Hans stops her. saying he'll do it with a cheeky smile. With nothing else to do, ʟᴇᴛ thanks him. Wasting no time, Hans helps the knights despite being small compared to them. Smiling, ʔᴏ notes his servant seems excited, totally understandable since ʔᴇᴛ is incredibly beautiful, and Glenn would never choose ugly women for his team. Someone politely requests permission, pulling ʔᴏ from his thoughts. Very close to him, ʔᴇᴛ asks if she can sit beside him briefly. ʔᴏ agrees. The saint thanks him for his kindness in letting her companions camp there. Being modest, ʔᴏ says it's no big deal, though his face shows slight discomfort at her proximity. ʔᴇᴛ stares at him, noticing he's about to speak. As expected, ʔᴏ asks what she's doing here. She replies she's traveling the land, offering prayers and blessings to those in pain. ʔᴏ says she's doing good work. ʔᴇᴛ responds she's only fulfilling her duty as a ʀᴇᴜᴜ follower. She asks what he's doing here. ʔᴏ replies he's searching for a way to be a good person. Suddenly inspired, he asks if she can tell him what should be done to be good. The girl looks intrigued. ʔᴏ says she's probably the best person to ask. Reflecting, the saint says there are many ways to be good and kind. She asks if he has special abilities. He says he's skilled with physical strength. ʔᴇᴛ suggests using that strength to help people in need. Confident, ʔᴏ declares he'll start looking for such people tomorrow. The next day, everyone explores the city. Accompanying ʔᴇᴛ, Belri notes all shops seem under construction. She agrees. Belri informs her he received an order from a woman and must fulfill it. ʔᴇᴛ smiles, wishing him luck. He asks her to take care. She promises. Later, somewhere else, ʔᴇᴛ feels distressed. Entering what appears to be an alley, she tells her knights she heard a scream from there. They say they'll investigate. Suddenly, ʔᴇᴛ sees something shocking: a young man being beaten by someone while others watch. Approaching, one knight orders the aggressor to stop, while ʔᴇᴛ can only think about how ʔᴏ could be capable of this. After the commotion, they talk. ʔᴇᴛ says she asked him to help people in need. She doesn't understand why he helped troublemakers instead. ʔᴏ states he did it because the people seem to need correction. ʔᴇᴛ orders him from now on to ensure he helps vulnerable people without using physical force, starting with apologizing to the boy he hurt. Sitting at the table with a swollen face, the boy says he's fine. Introducing himself, he says his name is Soon and he's grateful to ʔᴇᴛ for saving him. Curious, ʔᴇᴛ asks why he was being beaten and if ʔᴏ and the boys tried taking his shop. Confirming, Soon explains a group called Siren Corporation is bribing people, including the mayor, to get what they want. Though his shop seems old, it's precious to him, full of memories of his grandfather and father. When he refused to surrender it, the group turned violent. Now he doesn't know what to do. Sympathetic, ʔᴇᴛ promises Soon needn't worry, she'll meet with Porty's mayor immediately to resolve this. One knight warns that ʀᴇᴜᴜ followers shouldn't involve themselves in politics. ʔᴇᴛ insists as a ʀᴇᴜᴜ follower, she cannot ignore this. She promises to solve everything. She quickly leaves, her guards running after her, while ʔᴏ feels something will go wrong. The next day, walking around the city, Hans asks what ʔᴏ is thinking. He replies he's considering what the saint said about helping the vulnerable. He feels she doesn't even understand it properly. Pinching Hans's cheeks, he adds he's worried that ʔᴇᴛ hasn't returned to camp. Suddenly, they spot a group examining a notice posted on a wall about a wanted person. Curious, they move closer, hearing people comment that the person in the portrait murdered the deputy mayor. ʔᴏ's eyes widen. The person drawn is ʔᴇᴛ. Hans is shocked. ʔᴏ is certain something is wrong. Townspeople keep saying they heard the young woman is a witch from ʀᴇᴜᴜ, that the city is in chaos because of her curse, better to hide at home during the night. Everyone runs desperately to lock themselves indoors, afraid of what comes next. Worried, Hans asks what ʔᴏ thinks happened. ʔᴏ says something seems strange, they should leave too. Later, they walk through the silent nighttime city. ʟᴇᴛ tries remembering if something like this happened in his past life, but concludes he has no memory of a curse on ʀᴇᴜ or ʞᴇᴜ murdering anyone. His doubt: did events change because he met the saint in this life? Hans warns someone is following them. An inhuman leg approaches, making strange noises, a zombie woman. Terrified, Hans asks if that's really undead. Without hesitation, ʟᴇᴛ charges, eliminating it in under 5 seconds with his sword. On his knees, Hans asks why something like that walks through the city. ʟᴇᴛ says he doesn't know, but something definitely isn't right. Elsewhere, someone expresses relief there were no victims. With lit torches, 2 guards tell the boys they'll handle the monster's body, thanking them for help. One man suggests they go inside, handing his torch to Hans, warning they might be affected by the witch's curse. The guards leave with the undead. Hans asks if ʟᴇᴛ really thinks ʞᴜ is a witch. ʟᴇᴛ replies no, he's sure the real culprit is using her as a disguise. Curious, Hans asks how he can be sure. ʟᴇᴛ starts saying it's because ʞᴜ is, but cannot finish. Hans questions if he knows something about her he isn't revealing. ʟᴇᴛ bluffs, claiming you can tell just by looking at her face she's good. Suddenly, he hears something, quickly turning. Confused, Hans asks what he heard. ʟᴇᴛ says nothing, just starts running in the opposite direction from home. Quickly arriving at a structure nearby, he appears at the door, finding ʞᴜ cornered and hiding alone, asking what she's doing there. Hans stands with his mouth wide open. Together, they return home. After bathing, the saint approaches. ʟᴇᴛ asks if the borrowed clothes fit. She confirms they do. ʟᴇᴛ says Hans went to buy dinner and will return soon. He asks where the knights protecting her are. ʞᴜ lowers her head. ʟᴇᴛ asks if they went on another mission. Tears fall from her eyes. She says the knights are gone because of her. Without much reaction, ʟᴛ hands her the wanted poster with her face, asking if what happened relates to what's written. Desperate, the saint denies being a witch. ʟᴛ says he knows that, surprising her with his faith in her innocence. He continues, stating he knows she wouldn't do bad things, but would like to know what happened since they last met. ʞᴜ says she'll tell him. Returning to that fateful day, she successfully solved the shop boy's issue. Unlike the greedy mayor, the deputy mayor seemed trustworthy and responsible. The man behind the mayor suggested offering guests a meal. After hesitation, the mayor agreed to prepare dinner, though reluctantly. ʞᴜ accepted since the holy knights were very hungry. Her mistake, deciding to see the mayor in the middle of the night. After the meal, they went to thank him for his kindness. Entering his office, they realized something terrible happened. Her knights immediately stood to protect her. The mayor, surrounded by bodies, said she saw something she shouldn't have. Shocked, one knight shouted for ʞᴜ to look at the back where Bello's statue floated, surrounded by purple light. ʞᴜ declares the mayor is Bello's puppet. Smiling, the man confirms she finally figured it out. Nervous, ʞᴜ asks what he's plotting. The floor's bodies begin rising. The mayor reveals he's offering her as sacrifice to the statue. Zombies charge. The knights counterattack, protected by the saint's power. ʞᴜ realizes there are too many undead, she probably can't handle them all. One knight turns, asking if she's okay, quickly realizing a zombie was approaching from behind. He urgently tells her to look back. Seeing there wouldn't be enough time, he throws her backward, taking the blow directly in her place. Sitting, ʟᴇᴛ asks if she's really talking about Bello's followers. Confirming, ʞᴜ explains the group serves the evil god, desiring destruction and chaos, committing attacks in his name. Intrigued, ʟᴛ asks what they're trying to do in ʀᴇᴜ. ʞᴜ thinks they're planning a ritual. She saw the inscription on the statue behind the mayor, "I offer the city to Bello." ʟᴛ shows he knows what it's about. ʞᴜ asks what he's hiding. In response, ʟᴛ states there are probably hidden statues around the city, and the book the mayor held must be the catalyst activating their power. The saint says after escaping the mansion, she tried seeking help at the ʀᴇᴜᴜ temple, but the city was closed and she couldn't contact anyone. Crying again, she says she needs to stop the ritual. ʔᴏ says he'll help with that, asking if that counts as a good deed. ʔᴇᴛ says yes, but worries she's putting him in danger. ʔᴏ asks her not to worry. Tomorrow night, they'll go to the mayor's mansion. The girl should rest. Opening the door, ʔᴏ discovers Hans was listening, but Hans blatantly denies it. Not caring, ʔᴏ says there's actually a job for him, whispering the plan quietly into his ear. Whatever it is, Hans is left shocked. The next day, during night, two men lie unconscious in the mayor's mansion backyard. ʔᴏ and his ally enter through a balcony. Carrying ʔᴇᴛ, he asks if she's okay. She confirms. They quickly move through hallways, stopping before the door where the saint last met the mayor. ʴᴛ says the statue was there. ʔᴏ states he can feel something evil behind the doors. Without waiting, they enter, finding the mayor facing a window, surrounded by purple light. ʴᴛ declares it was the man who killed the deputy mayor. Moving forward, ʔᴏ charges, cornering the man with his sword. No reaction, this confuses ʔᴏ. Worried, ʴᴛ warns undead may appear. Placing his foot on the mayor's back and pushing, ʔᴏ says she accused the wrong person. The man who just fell isn't the mastermind. ʴᴛ is shocked. She was sure she was right. A purple aura emerges from the mayor's mouth. Smiling, ʔᴏ says they found the real culprit. The person approaches, saying he didn't expect her to return willingly. The real villain, the deputy mayor, who was never dead. Shocked, ʴᴛ insists she was sure the man was no longer among them, quickly realizing he holds the book possessing Bello's power. With a dark look, the deputy mayor declares the book is the key to the offering ritual. ʴᴛ asks how he got it. ʔᴏ explains he understands now the mayor followed someone else's orders until taken down. Just a puppet, not a Bello follower. The one controlling everything from the beginning was the deputy mayor himself. Sweating, ʴᴛ says this cannot be true. She asks what the man did to the holy knights. Laughing, he says she needn't worry, their bodies became fish food. His only doubt, who is the boy beside her? Some kind of secret guard? ʔᴏ reveals he has nothing to do with ʴᴇᴜᴜ. Intrigued, the deputy mayor asks what he's doing there. ʔᴏ replies he doesn't need to explain anything to someone who believes in a fish head. Annoyed, the man asks if he really said that he's asking to be punished by Bello. Smiling, ʔᴏ asks why he'd be punished by a fish head, awakening the man's fury. He declares ʔᴏ will pay for his blasphemy until his last breath. Undead appear. The deputy mayor screams, ordering them to finish ʔᴏ and keep ʴᴛ alive. Without hesitation, creatures charge. To help, the saint blesses ʔᴏ, asking him to be careful. With his skill activated and protected by ʴᴛ, ʔᴏ beautifully dodges strikes, counterattacking one by one with his blue glowing sword. Seeing his minions defeated, the man thinks this can't be possible. No one should annihilate undead so easily. Meanwhile, ʔᴏ realizes he's recovered some mana. Mocking, he asks if the man won't summon more monsters. Trembling with rage, the deputy mayor says ʔᴏ's arrogance won't help. The ritual preparations are complete. ʔᴏ doubts it, leaving his opponent stunned. With a smirk, he states he'll find and destroy all statues hidden around the city. The man says he won't be able to. ʔᴏ says a ʴᴇᴜᴜ member surely can, revealing he knows the deputy mayor protected the statues to a certain point. ʴᴛ steps closer, asking if that's really possible. Confirming, ʔᴏ says after destroying all Porty's statues, they only need to return and destroy the last one. Furious, the Bello follower calls ʔᴏ filthy trash, ordering undead to rise and attack again. Quickly, ʔᴏ draws his sword, striking creatures non-stop, leaving his opponent angrier and ʴᴛ worried. Moving to ʴᴛ's side, he picks her up, asking her not to move so she won't get hurt. They're getting out of there. Sweating, ʴᴛ says the entrance is blocked. ʔᴏ starts running toward the window. She asks him to wait. Without hesitation, he crashes through the glass with his back, ensuring his friend doesn't get hurt. The deputy mayor concludes he's lost the duo better to revise his evil plan. The next day, someone shouts through the city, spraying posters warning the witch ʟᴇᴛᴜ killed the mayor. Residents gather, picking up papers from the ground. Shocked by the news, confused seeing an unknown person drawn ʔᴏ, accused of being the witch's subordinate. Looking at his wanted poster, ʔᴏ says his drawing looks great, not even that scribble can hide his handsomeness. One thing seems strange, the deputy mayor must have gotten lazy drawing it better. Biting bread, he concludes this. He asks ʴᴛ to stop worrying they need to eat first. She asks where he got the food. He reveals he borrowed it since he had no other option given no one can see his face. Falling to her knees, ʴᴛ sighs. ʔᴏ says he didn't steal, he took it on credit. Looking at him, ʴᴛ asks if that doesn't require the owner's consent. ʔᴏ claims she can't always live by rules, but he'll return later and pay double as apology. ʴᴛ asks where Hans is. ʔᴏ says he sent him on a mission he definitely didn't enjoy. While eating bread, ʴᴛ asks where they're going now. ʔᴏ says the next step is finding statues. A bit lost, ʴᴛ asks if he knows how. ʔᴏ says they should start with the slums, he has a place in mind. Later, they arrive there, seeing 3 young men gathered in an alley. ʔᴏ approaches, catching their attention, saying it's been a while. Desperate, the 3 scream seeing ʴᴛ she's the witch, and ʔᴏ is her subordinate. They all start running immediately. Determined not to let them escape, ʔᴏ jumps into the air, landing right on top of one boy, blocking the other 2's escape. Smiling, he says they don't need to run, he won't bite. The 2 boys stand disbelieving, mouths wide open, fearing death. Looking at their faces, ʴᴛ says she recognizes them from when Soon was beaten. ʔᴏ notices the 3rd boy attempting escape, quickly turning to ask if he's the kind of person who abandons friends. Placing his hand on the boy's head, giving him no escape, the boy says they're criminals, being seen with them will cause trouble. With a grin, ʔᴏ says he doesn't need to worry, he's looking for someone to join his team. On the ground, boys ask why they should help, but quickly change their minds, learning they'll be well paid. Eyes sparkling, the 3 step closer, asking how they can help. Starting interrogation, ʔᴏ asks if they know anyone who suddenly got sick or died unexpectedly, as if their life force was drained. 2 boys look at the red-haired boy, who turns, claiming he doesn't know anyone like that. ʔᴏ asks why he's hiding something if he's getting paid for information. Without an answer, he grabs the boy, locking his neck to stimulate his memory. The boy keeps claiming he doesn't know anything. Surprisingly, ʴᴛ approaches and kneels, humbly asking the boy to say what he knows. Looking at ʴᴛ, ʔᴏ asks what she's doing. Responding, the saint tells the boys the city is in danger. It could become a city of death overnight, despite being hard to believe. Yelling, the red-haired boy says it's her fault undead are walking around. If it weren't for ʴᴛ, his brother wouldn't be sick, finally revealing what he was hiding. ʔᴏ asks him to take them to his brother. The boy refuses, asking why. Annoyed, ʔᴏ simply grabs him again, inviting himself to his house. Far away in an abandoned-looking cabin, the saint says she did everything she could, but the sick boy won't recover until the root problem is found. ʔᴏ asks the red-haired boy if anyone approached his brother. Confirming, he says yes, he saw with his own eyes who attacked him. ʔᴏ asks who. Narrowing his eyes, the boy asks how ʔᴏ doesn't remember if he's seen the person before, revealing it was the shop owner ʔᴏ helped beat up Soon. Shocked, ʴᴛ asks if he's sure. The boy confirms Soon, whom she saved, made his brother sick. If it hadn't been for her, he could have helped. ʔᴏ asks him to calm down and explain in detail he needs to fully understand. Going back, he arrived home later than usual, didn't find George. Since his fragile brother worried him, he quickly searched. Approaching an alley, he heard a voice, someone attacking his brother with some power. The masked person saw him and ran. He chased, catching up, pulling off the mask while demanding to know what was done to his brother. Discovering the hooded person was Soon. ʔᴏ asks if his brother got sick from that day. The boy confirms because there were no wounds and George regained consciousness. He thought everything was fine. But then George grew thin, kept saying he had no energy, fainting. ʔᴏ asks if that's why the boy requested his help. Confirming, he explains he tried stealing Soon's dagger to make a deal for his brother's cure, but ʔᴏ ruined his plan. Saddened, ʔᴏ apologizes, saying she misunderstood. She thought a vulnerable person was being attacked. The boy asks if she thought that because several people were beating Soon, or because he's from the slums, or because he looks like a thug, catching ʔᴏ off guard as he asks if that's how she distinguishes strong from weak. ʔᴏ intervenes, saying that's enough. He states ʔᴏ spent her life protected, therefore lacking real-world experience. He asks why the boy doesn't hate him too, since he also betrayed him after ʔᴏ appeared. The boy replies it was because it was the first time someone helped them without caring about their condition. The revelation leaves ʔᴏ speechless. Leaving the cabin, he asks what ʔᴏ thinks. She says she definitely felt Bello's filthy energy and George the boy is clearly an offering. ʔᴏ says then they should start from there, revealing he's discovered something. At the shop, Soon carries boxes back and forth. Suddenly, he feels something strange. Opening the basement door, he decides to investigate. Reaching the back, he realizes it might have been a rat. But suddenly, ʔᴏ appears behind him, asking if he remembers him. Thinking, Soon wonders what ʔᴏ is doing there. Quickly explaining, ʔᴏ says he didn't manage to finish beating him last time, so he came back to finish the job. Now he won't be interrupted. The guardian angel who protected him returned as an angel from hell. Soon is thrown hard to the ground, screaming in pain. He begs ʔᴏ to spare his life, asking what he did. ʔᴏ tells him to ask the fish head behind him, maybe he needs more beating to remember. Injured, Soon asks if ʔᴏ thinks he's a Bello follower, insisting he's not. However, ʔᴏ says he knows he's not a follower, but rather a bastard hanging around the group, picking up leftovers. ʔᴏ watches, showing sadness. Her eyes widen. Her ally has drawn his sword. ʔᴏ says now that they found the statue, they don't need Soon anymore. Desperate, Soon says he knows where the others are, the other statues' locations. Grabbing Soon by the collar, ʔᴏ orders him to speak immediately. Soon smiles, saying he can't give information for free, not without guarantees he'll leave alive. Seeing ʔᴏ's face, he asks why he's looking at him like that, if he's finally understood. Furious, ʔᴏ says he belongs to useless scum, he should have killed him much earlier. ʔᴏ asks if Soon is really that bad. He replies by asking if she thinks he's an idiot, insulting her, saying that's why everyone calls her a witch. Sad, ʔᴏ asks why he's doing these things since he said he wasn't a Bello follower. Replying, Soon says he's doing everything for money. He hated his old moldy shop, everything his father and grandfather passed down, so he grabbed the only chance to get rid of it all. ʔᴏ interrupts, telling ʔᴏ they're wasting time, while Soon demands he let him go and leave safely if he wants to know where other statues are. ʔᴏ says it's a shame he just changed his mind, deciding to finish him right there since he can figure out the location himself. Soon is clearly bluffing. Soon says he won't accept that, desperately begging ʔᴏ to stop ʔᴏ because he's a vulnerable person. The saint remains silent, considering, then asks ʔᴏ to rid them of Soon. Screaming, Soon keeps begging to be spared, suddenly stopping, giving the impression he's no longer living. ʔᴏ shows signs of feeling sick. Approaching her, ʔᴏ tells Soon if he sees him again, he'll wish he were dead. They leave, abandoning Soon lying on the ground injured, so scared he almost soils himself. They return to the red-haired boy's cabin. ʔᴏ sits on the porch, reflecting alone. ʔᴏ approaches, offering bread, asking if she's okay. ʔᴏ says she's been making wrong judgments the whole time, even in Soon and Timmy's situation. Her prejudices spoke louder, something ʟᴇᴜᴜ taught her never to do. ʔᴏ asks if she's fighting guilt, saying she doesn't need to feel that way. ʔᴏ apologizes for how she acted, saying she should be asking him for advice. Eating bread, ʔᴏ says he has nothing to offer besides what she already knows. His words wouldn't do her any good. Better for ʔᴏ to overcome what happened on her own, whether by accepting or letting go, because holding guilt too long will only make her feel worse. The saint says he's much more mature than she thought. ʔᴏ asks what she said. She quickly deflects, claiming nothing. They should look for the other statue soon. With a saddened expression, ʔᴏ apologizes for helping so little. ʔᴏ asks her not to be silly from now on. She'll have the most important role. Night falls, bringing a storm. In an unknown house, ʔᴏ asks how ʔᴏ knew the fallen men would be there. Explaining, ʔᴏ says they were hired with money promises like soon. Now she must hurry fuse her holy power into the brush, then paint the statue. ʔᴏ quickly obeys. The brush glows bright yellow. Finishing, she confirms it's done. ʔᴏ thanks her, saying he's also finished. The statue is now covered with drawn symbols. Placing her hand over the stone, ʔᴏ adds finishing touches. Completing it, she asks if they should leave. ʔᴏ says her power already flowed into the underground waters, everything will be fine. They should head to the next place. Looking back, ʔᴏ wonders if that will be enough to stop the ritual. Meanwhile, at the mayor's mansion, the person responsible for the ritual sits at his desk with power flowing through his body, observing the wanted posters he drew and spread around the city. Staring at ʔᴏ's poster, he smiles wickedly, hoping she returns soon. Far away, someone runs carrying another in their arms. Bellry and Hans. Hans warns he's going to vomit. Stopping abruptly, Bellry throws Hans to the ground, telling him he'll continue without him. Screaming, Hans says he can't just leave him there. Too late. Red eyes appear in the bushes behind him. Scared, Hans starts running, shouting Bellry's name. Meanwhile, ʔᴏ and ʔᴏ walk through the city. Worried, ʔᴏ keeps wondering if the plan will work, revealing it's been days since they've been finding and painting statues, but she doesn't know what the magical symbols mean. Suddenly, ʔᴏ hears a scream. They come face to face with a zombie. ʔᴏ asks if the monster seems different from others' much slower movements, meaning their efforts weren't in vain. After defeating the monster, ʔᴏ says the number of undead wandering the city is also much lower, all thanks to ʔᴏ. Smiling, ʔᴏ says she's relieved while ʔᴏ watches her smiling as well. He asks if she thought the magic circles wouldn't work. Embarrassed, ʔᴏ says it's not that she doesn't trust him, she just never heard of that method or knew it was such a powerful technique. Trying not to reveal he created it, ʔᴏ says anyway, it's time to find the main statue at the mayor's mansion. Now that all statues are painted, the ritual's power must be much weaker, and the deputy mayor is probably there at the center. Grabbing her weapon, ʔᴏ says they should go immediately. Quickly arriving, they enter without knocking. Standing before the large doors again, ʔᴏ states she can feel strong energy currents from inside. ʔᴏ asks his ally to stay behind, he's taking the lead from now on. Without hesitation, he opens the door, entering stealthily and cautiously. A purple light beam appears, hitting and shattering a window behind ʔᴏ, who gets scared. ʔᴏ reveals it caught him by surprise. ʔᴏ asks if he's okay. Replying, ʔᴏ says yes, it wasn't a big deal. Most important, he didn't sense the scythe-wielding creature's presence earlier. Nervous, ʔᴏ asks why high-level monsters are there. The monster, resembling a Dementor, charges again without hesitation. ʔᴏ defends using his sword, stating the only thing the monster excels at is killing people. They engage in brief battle, but ʔᴏ quickly strikes with consecutive blows, finishing the enemy. Other creatures rise from the ground. Worried, ʔᴏ asks ʔᴏ to look behind. The monster is about to strike a fatal scythe blow at ʔᴏ, who dodges in time while saying his opponent's assassination skills aren't bad, could be effective if it weren't him they were fighting. With apparent battle's end, ʟᴇᴛ asks how shadow monsters appeared there. ʟɪᴏ says the creatures must have been summoned by Bello, making ʟᴇᴛ more nervous. The deputy mayor approaches, saying there's only one reason his ritual hasn't lost power as she thought. The mansion starts collapsing. ʟɪᴏ states the ritual must be starting. Eyes wide, ʟᴇᴛ asks if their efforts didn't help at all. Calming her, ʟɪᴏ says they will help, but first they need escape. Grabbing his sword, activating power, he literally starts breaking an exit through the floor, causing a slight explosion. Grabbing ʟᴇᴛ, he asks her to hold tight, starts running toward the improvised exit while everything collapses around them.